Let's revisit for a moment the well-known story of Antionette Lattouf, the journalist sacked for tweeting a factual report about Israel in her private social media account. For reasons we'll explain in a moment, we call this story Conscience and Complicity. The story is of the lengths ABC chair Ida Buttrose went to remove Antionette Lattouf, then on a 5-day contract, from her organization. Ms. Buttrose was under pressure from a tiny group of well-connected Australians who didn't like the idea of someone with Ms. Lattouf's sympathies working for a national broadcaster. Although the ostensible reason for her sacking was that she tweeted a Human Rights Watch report, as we'll see in a moment, that reason was just a pretext.
Ms. Lattouf was not dismissed.
That, ladies and gentlemen, is what $2.5 million in legal advice buys one of the most highly respected boards in Australia. A legalistic, pedantic, technical argument about the case. One that demonstrates, in our opinion, a board which is dangerously out of touch with the way this story was landing with the public, the damage it was doing, well-deserved damage in our view, to the ABC's reputation and long-term value of its franchise in Australia. We think the story is especially tragic because, and this is something many young Australians probably can't appreciate, but Ms. Buttrose is by any reckoning a genuine Australian feminist icon. She was a pioneer as an executive and media personality who for 5 decades was one of the most powerful women in Australia, and since 2019, a companion of the Order of Australia, the highest honor an Australian can receive. She is quite literally Australian nobility.
She's a face so familiar, she almost needs no introduction.
Not everyone gets a song written about them.
I know.
Like Pop Chisholm.
Ida Buttrose, a media icon who went from copy girl to chair of the national broadcaster.
For almost 60 years, Ida Buttrose has been a trailblazer in Australian media, from her time as editor of Clio to her recent tenure at the ABC.
Ida has always said what's on her mind, and at 83, she's as candid as ever.
Australians trust Ida, I trust Ida, and that's why I've asked her to take on this role.
Over the years, you've been described as trailblazing, charming, elegant, a flirt, tough, even scary. Which one do you like the most?
Oh, scary. Absolutely scary. Yes, I'm glad I put the fear of God into people.
Which is perhaps why she can give such answer to a question like that. An answer one has to be a lord to get away with giving. Her title, Companion, the C in AC, comes from the chivalric tradition of recognizing special status to those who were companions of the sovereign. In fact, the word companion has the same Latin root, comes, as the words count, comte, conde, conti, or countess. She is, for all intents and purposes, an Australian countess. Which is why we found it so astonishing that the ABC, an organization full of people who understand storytelling, did not recognize the reputational Chernobyl they were leading their organization into. A haughty, imperious, and callous countess with a healthy dose of sadism.
Yes, I'm glad I put the fear of God into people.
Setting out to ruin the life of a young, innocent heroine, whose only crime is telling the truth in a court full of mandarins afraid to do so.
I warn you, I am not to be trifled with. A report of a most alarming nature has reached me. I know this to be a scandalous falsehood, industriously circulated by yourself, a young woman of inferior birth.
If you believed it to be impossible, I wonder you took the trouble of coming so far. Your coming will be rather a confirmation, surely, if...
You selfish girl!
How many Jane Austen novels, or books by Dickens, Hugo, or Zola must one have read before recognizing that this is a story that's going to tell itself?
Can't she come down with the flu or COVID? We owe her nothing.
You selfish girl.
No apologies. Well, one thing I can confirm is that is true because she does not apologise.
No,
Fact checked, confirmed. Ida Buttrose does not apologise.
And now, thanks to their lack of humility and imagination, it is a generational story for the ABC.
Antionette Lattouf's unlawful termination. Did you ever question how that was handled?
Well, now when I left, we were going to settle. So what happened between then and when the case eventually came to trial, God only knows.
God only knows. They were never going to settle. Essentially, she blames David Anderson and Chris Oliver-Taylor.
Ida, you navigated your way through a proper misogynistic man's world of media.
So it wasn't me. It was David Anderson. It was Chris Oliver Taylor.
How did you navigate it? How did you survive it? How did you thrive in it?
Now that millions of Australians have a better understanding of how women like Ms. Buttrose operate, how the sausage is made, if you will, they aren't impressed.
I didn't expect an apology, but I didn't expect this kind of warped reality PR tour that's just like completely devoid of facts and a very ironclad federal court ruling.
Of course, not all Australians shared Ms. Lattouf's surprise or disappointment.
I love seeing you a lot. You brighten my day every time I see you. I wish I'd see you more often.
And I'm trying to make sense of all of this. And I genuinely feel like there is something that I am missing about Ita Buttrose.
Well, just invite me in. You're welcome anytime.
Thank you, Ida.
Because Karl Stefanovich's audience is not the future of this country.
The nostalgia to her as a trailblazer in media.
I don't have any of it.
Yeah, we don't. But many other Australians do. Older generations certainly spent a lot of time getting to know her, and certainly many that have contacted me had a different image of what she was and what she represented.
And what, in fact, all of elite Australiana and Western society was and represented, which, we are sad to say, has been discredited in the eyes of the generation that will inherit our world. The entire board and management of the ABC, under 2 successive administrations, pressed on with their dogged determination to role-play the villain of every English society drama ever aired on the ABC. Don't these people consume their own content? It's not just the cruelty inflicted on Ms. Lattouf that astonishes us.
She received death threats after she was sacked. She needed to hire her own private security.
It's the immolation of the ABC's own brand and reputation, which we believe has been impaired generationally. To his credit, Hugh Marks, the ABC's new MD, says that he recognizes this and is determined to address it. We wish him success, because Australian democracy needs a strong and fearless ABC. But we are sober about his prospects, because cultural change is hard, no matter how well-intentioned a new CEO may be. Let's quickly summarize what happened for those not familiar with the case. If you live in Australia, this won't be news to you, but bear with us for a few moments as we establish the fact base, because we believe there is much, much more to the story than what you have read about to date. After October 7th, 2023, a group of allegedly 158 Australian lawyers calling themselves Lawyers for Israel formed a WhatsApp group for the purpose of discussion and mutual support. This group included solicitors, barristers, and King's Counsels or senior counsels. Now, for viewers in the US who may be unfamiliar with common law tradition, a King's Counsel, or sometimes called Senior Counsel or SC or KC, is recognized as one of the top 10% of barristers in the country, which means, among other things, that the Hogwarts gown and wig you might have in your mind when you think of a barrister is made of silk rather than wool. That's why KCs are sometimes referred to as silks. It's a real honor. Only one of about 150 lawyers in Australia are silks. In addition to being a silk, the leader of the campaign against Ms. Lattouf was a member of the Order of Australia, or AM, and holds positions of leadership across high-profile institutions in Australia and around the world. In other words, he's a pretty big deal. Due to a legal suppression order we'll tell you about in a moment, we can't tell you who it is, which in and of itself tells you what a big deal he is. So out of respect to the federal court, we shall simply call him the world's most moral KC. 10 weeks after forming, on Sunday the 17th of December, the ABC announced that Antionette Lattouf would be presenting a radio program for the next 5 days of that week. It was to be light entertainment, nothing to do with politics, that's it. But Ms. Lattouf is guilty of a crime, ladies and gentlemen. The crime of being Lebanese in Australia, and not having the good sense to keep to herself opinions about Israel that, let's be frank, are probably universally held amongst Australians of Levantine or Eastern Mediterranean family background, and now, thanks to Gaza, probably common amongst 90% of Australians under 40, if not all Homo sapiens on this planet under 40. But on Sunday, the 17th of December 2023, none of that was obvious to Lawyers for Israel. All they knew was that Ms. Lattouf was the kind of Australian who had the temerity to say things about Israel that no one in their bubble had ever said. As we shall see, that was their loss, not Ms. Lattouf's. However, that made Ms. Lattouf ineligible in their eyes to work for a national broadcaster. Leaked messages show they got to work right away. On Sunday, 18 hours before Ms. Lattouf even started her job, and this is important, before she tweeted about that now famous Human Rights Watch report, which was the pretext for her sacking.
Miss Lattouf was not dismissed.
Whatever. The point is that Lawyers for Israel acted fast. Next morning, Monday morning, as Ms. Lattouf was probably finalizing her onboarding and receiving her temporary security badge, 14 complaints were lodged with the ABC. Emails sent directly to directors on the board, and what sounds like the entire exco. Rachel Baxendale, an Australian political reporter famous for her hyper-confrontational partisan style, peppered the ABC with questions about Antionette Lattouf, and presumably what the ABC was even thinking, hiring a woman who was so clearly unacceptable to the Israel lobby. Australians can safely presume, therefore, that this is something that would never happen at News Corp, or at 9, 7, or 10. On Tuesday, Ms. Lattouf's second day, the pressure continued, all unbeknownst to Ms. Lattouf. This time it included a direct appeal to the Federal Minister for Communication, Michelle Rowland. The Federal Minister for Communication, ladies and gentlemen, about a presenter on a 5-day contract. Remember, the ABC has clear channels to allow citizens to make complaints. It's right there on the ABC's website and is open to every citizen, all 28 million of us, Christians, Muslims, Jews, all of us. But that wasn't good enough for Lawyers for Israel. They went directly to the board, directly to the exco, and directly to a federal minister. And not one of them, not even the terrifying Countess herself.
Oh, scary. Absolutely scary.
Not one of these Australians had the dignity or self-respect to say to them, "Thank you for your text or your phone call, but I've got a lot on my plate." And the ABC have well-established channels for this sort of feedback.
Yes, I'm glad I put the fear of God into people.
Please don't abuse our relationship by contacting me personally with a matter like this. Nobody said that. Nobody. Because it seems that in Australia, at least, there are some people even scarier than the scary Countess of Australian media. Had even one of these august Australians done that, think about how much national trauma could have been avoided for everyone in this story, including for the members of Lawyers for Israel. By Wednesday, Ms. Lattouf's third day on the job, the execution was almost complete. One of the lawyers in the group wrote to the team, "It is important the ABC hear not just from individuals, but specifically from lawyers so they feel there is an actual legal threat." This is according to texts leaked to the Sydney Morning Herald and reported on the 16th of January 2024. This same lawyer then added, "I told them I would look to engage a senior counsel. I know there is probably no actionable offense, but I didn't say I would be taking one, just investigating one." These are all people, ladies and gentlemen, 158 of them, who are all licensed to practice law in Australia. They are solicitors, barristers, KCs, possibly judges, we can't know, and at least one member of the Order of Australia. This is our legal system we're talking about. It's what they sound like when they think the rest of us can't hear. Later that day, the world's most moral KC shared the news with all 158 Lawyers for Israel that Antionette Lattouf was to be dismissed, quote, "due to her stance on Israel," unquote. A stance which, we must remind everyone, she never once articulated while on the job at the ABC. In what must surely be the crowning insult to all this injury, the world's most moral KC shared this news about Ms. Lattouf's firing with 158 Lawyers for Israel, none of whom had any business knowing this information, which was internal to the ABC, before the ABC even shared that information with Ms. Lattouf herself. In June this year, Justice Darrell Rangier of the federal court found that ABC fired Ms. Lattouf illegally. He awarded her $70,000 in compensation and in September added another $150,000 in punitive damages, bringing her total compensation to $220,000 for the way she was treated over her 5-day contract. If you live in Australia, none of this will be news to you. So why did we make a video about it? Because there are things about this story we feel have not received the scrutiny and attention they deserve. And it's not the specifics about what happened to Ms. Lattouf. It's not even the impact her treatment has had on the reputation of the ABC.
I'm wondering how the sacking of Antionette Lattouf accords with those responsibilities.
Or are we going to muzzle ourselves? Is that the depths you've sunk to?
Which we have already covered in another video. It's what all this says about us, about Australia, about the integrity of our legal system, the health of our democracy and politics, and most important, about our decency. Let's take these issues in reverse order of importance and controversy, starting with the most basic and obvious one. A secret campaign to pressure the ABC to break the law was carried out by 158 Australian solicitors, barristers, KCs, and at least one member of the Order of Australia.
Amongst the lobbyists who clamoured and pressured the ABC to sack Antionette Lattouf were lawyers.
To our knowledge, there seems to be zero curiosity about the point Mr. Borstein is making.
It is not the role of a lawyer to try and pressure an organisation to illegally sack an employee, in my view.
In fact, we've seen the opposite of curiosity.
The judge suppressed for 10 years the names and addresses of a group called Lawyers for Israel, who were allegedly behind the campaign of complaints against Lattouf. The judge satisfied that if their identities were known, they would be subject to vilification and harassment.
Those are their words, by the way, as articulated by Sydney's superstar legal duo Sue Crisantho and Rebecca Giles, who persuaded the court to issue that suppression order because her clients, in their words,
would be subject to vilification and harassment.
Now let's be clear. We don't wish to see vilification and abuse on anyone. But we have a suspicion that this type of protection from the reputational consequences of one's own actions might not come so readily to you or to me or to any other Australia who isn't of the caliber of the world's most moral KC.
Each person must deal with their own conscience, but lawyers in particular have particular ethical and other obligations, which I invite those that were involved in this exercise to consider in light of this judgment.
Consider this leaked message. It is important the ABC hear not just from individuals, but specifically from lawyers, so they fear there is an actual legal threat. I told them I would look to engage a senior counsel. I know there's probably no actionable offense, but I didn't say I would be taking one, just investigating one. Now, we have no idea if this embarrassingly sophomoric attempt at deception had any effect on anyone inside the ABC. But as Australian citizens, it strikes us as coming uncomfortably close to violating Rule 22 of the Australian Solicitors' Conduct Rules, or Rule 49 of the Barristers' Conduct Rules, which state, quote, a solicitor or barrister, depending on the rule, must not knowingly make a false or misleading statement to an opponent in relation to a case. It also strikes us as uncomfortably close to violating Rule 10 of these same conduct rules, which state that a barrister must not use or permit the use of professional qualification for the advancement of any other occupation or activity in which he or she is directly or indirectly engaged. Does anyone dispute that using one's credentials to pressure the ABC to illegally remove a journalist whose views on Israel one doesn't like meets the definition of any other occupation or activity in which one is directly or indirectly engaged? What about Rule 8 of the Barristers' Conduct Rules? A barrister must not engage in conduct which is A, dishonest or otherwise discreditable to a barrister, B, prejudicial to the administration of justice, or C, likely to diminish public confidence in the legal profession or the administration of justice, or otherwise bring the legal profession into disrepute. Can anyone tell us how it's possible for Justice Rania to find, on the one hand, that Lawyers for Israel engage in conduct which will invite
vilification and harassment,
but not, on the other hand, discreditation? Is there such a thing as conduct which is vilifiable but not discreditable? Perhaps if we're talking Atticus Finch, bravely defending a black man in the middle of Jim Crow, maybe. But the world's most moral KC is no Atticus Finch. Can anyone tell us how it's possible for 158 lawyers to pressure a major Australian corporation to break the law, but no one wonder whether that constitutes, quote, conduct which is prejudicial to the administration of justice, unquote, or likely to diminish public confidence in the legal profession, unquote? At this moment, 28 million Australians know that a material number of solicitors, barristers, KCs, and at least one member of the Order of Australia engaged in conduct which they themselves told the court was likely to invite
vilification and harassment.
But we can't know who it is, which means we can't know who it isn't. They could be any lawyer, or more specifically, any Jewish lawyer in Australia. And no one in Australia is curious as to whether public confidence in the legal profession might therefore be diminished. Or are we just afraid to ask?
And no one asked that question because anyone in whose mind that question appeared would have paused for fear of being attacked as an anti-Semite. That has been the state of play in the United States for my entire life, over 50 years.
Notice a pattern? That's what's driving an incredibly consequential debate in the US right now, which has obvious parallels for us here in Australia.
It's still so easy for people who support unconditional support of what Israel's doing to go on the US media and say things that are palpably, obviously untrue and not be challenged on these things.
Politicians make nonsensical statements.
The government has long warned against foreign conflicts being brought here.
Nobody wants to even ask a follow-up question for fear of being attacked.
Now it believes Iran itself has done just that.
I actually do believe they use blackmail. I actually do believe they do that. So
it is a state of perpetual intimidation.
They participate. Rise.
Teach them how to defend by attacking.
We're not getting pushed around anymore.
Everybody's afraid of Israel.
There needs to be a price to be paid for being an anti-Semite.
Afraid of the topic, afraid, in some cases, of the state itself.
I would never take my own life. I would never take my own life. You hear that, Israel?
We're now seeing consequences levied against those who take action and stand against our people.
How much of this can we take? Just being completely humiliated.
Get a massage, get a massage. And what happened in that massage room, I assume is on video.
Across all sectors where Jews have influence, we need to bring that influence to bear.
We have not had an honest conversation about this, ever.
If you're the partner of a law firm and you see an applicant has engaged in this sort of conduct, don't employ them.
What is that about? Why are we allowing this? Why are we allowing all of this humiliation?